As the opening bell rang for the first match of WrestleMania 23, one superstar after another made their way to the ring. But among them was a rising star, Mr. Kennedy, who was set to cement his place amongst WWE's elite by securing the Money in the Bank briefcase. But little did anyone know, this moment would not be the beginning of a career-defining push, but rather the first chapter in a story of missed opportunities, backstage politics, and an untimely fall from grace. This is the story of the cursed WWE career of Mr. Kennedy. In 2002, WWE hit the jackpot with its OVW graduating class of Cena, Orton, Batista, and Lesnar, all of them graduating to become exemplary superstars. However, for the years to come, the company seemed unable to replicate performers of the same caliber until they landed their hands on Ken Anderson. Paul Heyman, who was the booker for OVW at the time, saw immense potential in Anderson and groomed him with the gimmick of announcing himself. After winning the OVW Championship belt, Ken found himself starting on SmackDown in 2005. WWE's trust in Ken was apparent as he quickly got through the usual mid-card talents, such as Paul London and Hardcore Holly, in swift fashion, and then transitioned to acquiring victories over main eventers such as Rey Mysterio and King Booker. It seemed that championship gold was in the near future for Mr. Kennedy, and nothing was going to stop him. But all the momentum that Kennedy had garnered would come to a screeching halt. In the same year, Kennedy participated in a 10-man battle royal in a house show during WWE's European tour. But in a spot in the match, Paul London drop-kicked Kennedy outside the ring, with Ken landing hard on ringside. He found his leg was hurting. Ken's leg continued to trouble him throughout the tour, but somehow he persevered. When he came back to the States, he went to the doctors for a checkup and found that he had a torn lat muscle and had to be sidelined for months. Sure, the accident was unfortunate, but this was just a minor setback, right? Kennedy returned months later stronger than ever. It was obvious that the company still had a lot of faith in Kennedy, as he would get his first taste of gold by winning the United States Championship, defeating both Bobby Lashley and Finlay in a triple threat match. And he held on to the belt for 6 weeks before dropping it to Chris Benoit. But Kennedy dropping the belt wasn't something tragic. In fact, it was part of a larger plan for his push to the top. In the next few weeks, Kennedy would go on to feud with the very best that SmackDown had to offer, Batista and The Undertaker, with Ken even picking up a couple of victories over both of these superstars, making it obvious that he was slowly being groomed to stay at the very top of the blue brand, and his time to shine was approaching soon. On the 1st of April 2007, on Kennedy's WrestleMania debut, he shocked the world by defeating 7 other big and reputable competitors, including Finlay, Edge, CM Punk, the Hardy Boys, Booker, and Randy Orton, in the coveted Money in the Bank ladder match. No question, this was almost a guarantee that Ken was going to be a world champion in a year and would cement himself at the top of the franchise. But that never happened. The initial plan for Kennedy after winning the Money in the Bank championship was to cash in on The Undertaker at next year's Mania. However, the plans had to be scrapped since the dead man suffered an injury a few months later, so it was decided that Kennedy would cash it on Taker on SmackDown after his steel cage match with the Animal, followed by a beatdown from Mark Henry. All the pieces seemed to fit in place for Kennedy, but the prize was yanked away from him in the worst possible way. Just a few weeks before his planned cash-in, Kennedy took a bad bump from a clothesline from Batista in a house show. On checkup with the WWE doctors, it was revealed that Ken had suffered a torn tricep and would need to be sidelined for about 8 months. With the news of Kennedy's injury and the urgent need for a champion, the creative team thought that the best solution at the time was to hand over the briefcase to someone else, namely the rated R superstar Edge. So 3 days before the planned cash-in, Kennedy lost a match to Edge with his Money in the Bank briefcase on the line. And on the same week as perfectly planned, Edge cashed in the briefcase against a beaten-up Taker to win the World Heavyweight Championship. A few weeks later, Ken visited a physician to start the treatment for his injury, and that's when he received shocking news. It was diagnosed that Ken didn't have a torn tricep but a hematoma, which meant that he wouldn't be sidelined for 8 months but merely for a few weeks, making his act of forfeiting the briefcase completely pointless. So if not for the wrong diagnosis by the WWE doctors, Kennedy would have been the new world champion. Weeks later, Kennedy made his big return to WWE, this time on the Raw brand as part of the annual draft, and the company quickly began making new plans to put Ken in the spotlight. Just 1 week after he arrived on Raw, Chairman Vince McMahon was announced dead due to someone blasting the chairman's limousine. WWE wrote Vince off television and tried hard to convince fans that he was really gone. But what does this have to do with Kennedy? Well, the creative team came up with the idea that Kennedy was to announce himself as Vince's illegitimate son, who was responsible for the demise of his father, an act of revenge. This shocking twist was meant to kickstart Ken's story after a string of bad luck. However, even this storyline had to be dropped midway when Vince was forced to publicly appear on television because of the Chris Benoit tragedy. It seemed that the black clouds that loomed over Kennedy refused to go away. Plans had to change again, but one thing remained clear. WWE was determined to make Kennedy a star. They decided to modify the original storyline, where now Vince would learn that he had an illegitimate son who turned out to be a WWE superstar. It was hinted to the fans that Ken was actually supposed to be the illegitimate son, and given that the reveal was scheduled for the Raw in Green Bay, Wisconsin, Kennedy's hometown, there were no doubts left. It seemed like Ken was finally set to bask in the glory after a series of setbacks, but Kennedy's luck ran out. Just 5 days before the big reveal, a scandal came to light. Reports came that Signature Pharmacy had illegally given steroids to numerous athletes, including many current and prominent WWE superstars, one of them being none other than Ken Anderson. But what made the matter worse for Kennedy was that just a few months ago, he was interviewed by Fox News regarding steroid abuse in the WWE, where Kennedy mentioned that he used steroids before, but he was no longer a user because of the strictness of the WWE wellness policy. But now that his name came up with the scandal, it shattered any credibility that WWE routinely checked its performers for substance abuse. So the WWE replaced Ken with Hornswoggle, announced as McMahon's illegitimate son, and as for Kennedy, he was suspended along with the other superstars listed in the scandal, and we had to wait to see what happened next. But no one could have imagined that even his first match back after suspension would leave another dent in his WWE career. On his return match, Kennedy was put into the main event against the champ John Cena. A typical main event where nothing should have gone wrong. But as luck would have it, as Cena delivered his usual hip toss, he injured his pectoral muscle, putting an end to his 380-day championship reign and forcing him to vacate the WWE title. Not to say that this was Kennedy's fault, but simply put, he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. The next few months of Kennedy's run could be summed up in one word: uneventful. After a few rivalries and switching from a heel to a babyface, Ken was drafted back to SmackDown. Maybe a change was needed for Kennedy and he could make a fresh start in the blue brand, but fate had different plans for him. Within just a few weeks of arriving there, as Kennedy faced Shelton Benjamin in a house show, he dislocated his shoulder and had to be sidelined for 9 months. Ken's run in WWE was almost over. All that was left was the final nail in the coffin. On the 2009 Memorial Day episode of Raw, a match was made between the babyface and heel teams wearing the colors of the LA Lakers and Denver Nuggets. The babyface team had a mystery member joining them, who turned out to be the returning Mr. Kennedy. But unknown to Kennedy, his first match back would be his last match in the WWE. In a spot in the match, Kennedy delivered a suplex on Randy Orton but botched it somehow, with Randy landing on his head. After the match was over, a furious Randy Orton went backstage, even dragging John Cena to complain to Vince McMahon. Randy argued to Vince that Kennedy was not a safe worker and needed to be let go, and together with Cena's support, Kennedy was fired. So do you believe Kennedy's career was actually cursed, or was it just bad luck, or his own fault? Let us know in the comments.